Hey everyone, Nick Symmonds here, two-time Olympian and the CEO of the energy gum company Run Gum, and today I am telling you guys my lifetime progression in the mile. That's right, a couple weeks ago I did a similar thing. I actually showed my lifetime progression in the 800. I'll link that video right here, and that video did really well. People clearly liked seeing my progression from the age of about 14 all the way to when I retired at the age of 33. And it was fun to go back and relive some of those moments, some of those stories, and tell you guys how I did it, how I went in the 800 from about 157 as a 14-year-old down to 142 ultimately as my peak at the 2012 Olympic Games. So today, let's do the same thing. Let's dig into the mile. And just like last time, I sat here and I built out an awesome Excel spreadsheet. So let's dig in. I'll pull it up right now. All right, so here it is, the spreadsheet. It starts in the year 2000. That was my first year running track. And as I recall my personal best that year, I was a sophomore, I was 15 years old, and I ran about 4:35. I'm pretty sure within a few seconds that that's accurate. And then, of course, it ends in 2015. Now, I actually retired in 2017, but I didn't run the mile in 16 or 17. And you'll notice that I don't run a lot of miles, or I didn't run a lot of miles. I was predominantly an 800-meter runner. In high school, I did run the 16, and in college, I did win 3 NCAA titles at 1,500 meters. But I really, from college on, I really viewed myself as more of a half miler. So there are years that I didn't run a mile, and the years that I did, I typically only ran 1 or 2. So this is a little bit more varied than my 800-meter progression just because I didn't race it as much. So one thing to note as we look at this chart here, I had to do a lot of conversions. So first of all, I get most of my times from, just like I did in the 800, I get most of my times here from the IAAF, and they have a historical progression of my season's best, and these are pretty accurate, dating all the way back to 2003, which is my freshman year of college. And then, of course, they have it up through the 2015, which was one of the last years I ran it. So take this with a grain of salt because it is for 1,500. Now, this is one where it gets really confusing, right? In America, for God knows what reason, we still use miles. I happen to believe that America should have switched and stayed on the metric system, but that's up for debate. So we run miles here, and for continuity's sake, I put everything into miles because I know a lot of my subscribers are based here in the United States and they're more interested in the mile. They're comparing themselves in the mile. They don't run a lot of 1500s. Okay, so I did have to convert everything, and what I did is I put it all into a mile. Now, a mile on the track, 5,280 feet, but on the track, which is 400 meters around, it's a little over 4 laps. It's actually 1,609 meters is a full mile. So in high school, for example, when I ran the 1,600, we were just shy of a mile, and it ends up being a little over a second and a half, I think, when you make that conversion. So you'll see here, the year 2000, I ran 1,600 meters, and the time ended up being 4:35 for 1,600 meters, which when you convert it goes to 4:36.6. Now, how did I convert it? Fortunately, I had some help. Let's see if I can drag this over. Here is Running Conversion Calculator by MileSplit, and this is a really handy tool. It allows you to convert times from 1,500 or 1,600 into a mile and vice versa. So what I did is I just plugged it in here, the time, whether I ran 1,600 or 1,500, and then I converted it over into what a mile would be. And that's pretty darn accurate. MileSplit has been doing this for years. About the conversion calculator, it's been around since 2003, and a lot of different high school and collegians use this to convert things. So the workbook here, so 1,600 meters gets converted over into 1,609, and then I convert that into seconds. So ultimately, everything here is done in seconds. It's very consistent, and you can see that 1,500 meters, when that was run, was also converted over to a mile and then converted into seconds so that I could plot it over here. Take a deep breath. Now let's walk through this. I'm going to tell you about each one of these data points, what I remember about it, and as I did in the 800, I'm going to try to splash in some imagery and some stories to kind of tell you guys how that I got this chart consistently decreasing year over year. So as I mentioned, in 2000, it was my first year of running track. I started out as a cross-country runner, And it was my sophomore year that was my first year running track. And I dabbled in the 8, but mostly I was a 2-miler, and I occasionally run the mile, and 4:35 is about as fast as I got. The next year, I took it really seriously. I knew I wanted to run track. I was passionate about it, and I actually ended up running 4 events at the Idaho State meet. I ran the 4x4, the 800, the 1600, and the 3200, and I won them all. So I actually ran 4:25 that year. That sounds slow to win a state meet. It kind of is, but Idaho's not that deep. So in the 4A school bracket in Idaho, I could win state titles with that. But the next year, 2002, was my senior year. I knew I was going to go on to Willamette University. I did the same 4-peat at the Idaho State meet. I won all 4 events again, this time lowering my personal best at the Idaho State meet down to 4:20. Now, this is the one I really want to get into because I'm super proud of this data point. When you go to 2003, that was my freshman year of college, and I actually went from what the equivalent of a 4:21.5 mile down to a 4:03.9 mile. So you see this huge drop on the chart here. That was shaving off nearly 18 seconds in the mile. Like, that's unheard of. How did I do it? Well, I went from being kind of a little bit of a slappy in high school where I goofed off a lot and didn't train that hard, and was winning races very easily. I wasn't being pushed to my ultimate limit, and I didn't race outside of Idaho, to college where I trained a lot harder. I was a lot more focused. I had teammates that pushed me and expected more of me, and also I had a chip on my shoulder. I came down here, I believe when I ran this 4:03.9, it was at the University of Oregon, and I was racing Mike McGrath at the time, who was a standout high school runner. And I said, I will not lose to a high schooler. He was only about 10 months younger than me. And I said, I don't care. I will not lose to him. And I bled in that race to beat him. But it ultimately worked out for a really nice PR. 4:03.9 as a freshman in college. I was very pleased with that. Then it kind of stalls out. You can see here I hit a plateau, and it definitely wasn't what I wanted. So what happened was I got injured. And in the fall, I got diagnosed with plica, inflammation of the plica underneath my kneecap, and I ended up having double knee surgery around Christmas time of my sophomore year. That was enough to keep me out for like 4 or 5 months. I didn't run a step from October until March, I want to say. And so when I finally started training again, it was really just to kind of try to salvage a season. And after 3 months of training and defending my 800 title at NCAA Nationals, I did stick around after school for a few weeks and raced in some exhibition races, including one that was up at Mount Hood Community College. It was actually a professional race, and I got to race some of the pros. And I think I finished dead last or second to last, hanging on for dear life in a time of 3:45.5, which when you convert it is a very, very small personal best by nearly half a second. But obviously not what I was hoping for. I was hoping to continue taking big chunks out of that PR, but that's running. Sometimes you're going to get injured, and sometimes you're going to have a rebuilding year. Unfortunately for me, it turned into 2 rebuilding years, right? Because here, my junior year, I stalled out again. I ran 4:04.5 for a full mile, and if I look back on it now, I joined a fraternity. Junior year is typically the hardest year in the biochemistry track at Willamette, and I was trying to have some kind of social life, so I probably didn't train the way I should have. I wasn't as focused as I need to be. I did win the NCAA title that year in both the 8 and the 15, so I took care of that business, and maybe I just didn't feel like I really needed to be living the lifestyle that it would take to be great. But here you see my senior year, I have another big jump. This is when I did decide, hey, I want to be great at track and field. And the summer between my junior year and senior year of college, I called up a couple buddies, and we actually moved down to central Mexico to train at 9,000 feet elevation with some professional Kenyan runners. And it was the summer of my life. It was incredible. I, for 12 weeks, said I'm going to live, eat, sleep, and do everything I can to be the greatest runner that I can. I went down weighing 180 pounds, and I came back weighing 148, and I was just a freaking endurance machine. I went on to win our conference cross-country title at 8K. I set a PR at 400 later that track season. I ran, defended my NCAA titles, and ultimately here, we're talking about the mile, my senior year of college, I went from a 3:45 PR in the 1500 down to 3:40. Or if you convert that to miles, I went from a 4:03 down to 3:58. I still don't consider that being a sub-4 mile. To be a sub-4 minute miler, you have to break 4 minutes in the mile. Okay, anyone who's run 340 or 341 in the 1500, that is phenomenal running, and you probably are in shape to break 4 in the mile, but you actually have to actually do it in a mile. So I still wasn't quite a sub 4 minute miler, but I obviously had the potential, and showing that potential in both the 8, where I finished second in the US at USA Outdoors, and then running the equivalent of a 358 sub 4 minute mile. Nike caught a hold of that and they gave me a contract. It was a very small contract, but it was enough to allow me to train full time. And so, of course, I moved down to Eugene right after I graduated to train with the Oregon Track Club Elite. Now, there's something to be said there. They call it the Elite for a reason, and I was surrounded with the best coach and the best trainer and the best teammates, and I saw results quickly. If you go into my first year, 2007, I ran a mile indoors. This is an indoor mile time, 3:56.5. It was my first sub 4 minute mile, and to this day is still the fastest mile I've ever run, 3:56.5. Now I ran faster than that converted from a 1500 time, and we'll get to that. But here he is, 2007. This was in January, I believe it was Jan 11. So really early in the year too. It's how strong I was during my base phase. During my base phase, 3:56.5. Following year, 2008, it's an Olympic year. I'm really focused on the 8, right? I really want to be the best 800 meter runner I can be, because I know that that's the event that I'm ultimately going to run at the Olympic Games. So 2008, I think I only ran maybe 1 or 2 1500s. 341 is pretty good running for me. I remember that was kind of a cold evening, so I was actually pretty pleased with it. And then 2009, here's the first gap, right? I've gone nearly a decade setting new personal bests almost every year. And then 2009, I don't even have a mark. What happened? Well, I got injured again. Again, injuries are just part of the sport, and sometimes you're able to rebuild like I did here in college, and sometimes you have to take a full year off of running. And I was able to salvage a 2009 season. I ended up running pretty well for 800, but I never got the training, and I took literally all of January, all of February, and most of March off. So 3 months where I just swam laps and didn't run at all. And I knew I didn't have the strength to run a great mile, so I just didn't. And that's okay. You don't have to force a square peg through a round hole. If you don't have it, then try something else. And I focused on my bread and butter event, which was the 8, and took the year off. And that's why there's a gap here. But the next year, 2010, I kind of pick up right where I left off with a 340.3 1500 meter time. And this back end of the graph here, the next 4 years, I'm really proud of these 4 years, because once you get down into that 356, 357, anything sub 4, it gets really exponentially harder to shave time. And I was able to do it really consistently in my mid to late 20s. Some people hang up their spikes in their mid 20s, and I always say your best years, as we saw in my 800 meter video, your best years are oftentimes in your late 20s. In the 800, I didn't peak until I was 28 or 29. And here in the mile, you can see 2013, 2014, I'm 28 and 29 in those years, so I'm really proud that I stuck it out and that I was able to continue to shave time all the way into my late 20s. So let's talk about that a little bit. 2011, I ran 3:38. That was at Stanford, and I got towed to a really fast time. I think Stephen Pfeiffer was the one that, as he often did, went wire to wire in that race, and I like I said, hung on for dear life. It converts to a 3:55 mile, so a nice PR there. Shaved 2 seconds off in 2012, another Olympic year. I was really strong. I'd spent a lot of time that winter building my base. I wanted to be the strongest 800 meter I wanted to be the strongest 800 meter runner that I could be, and I did it. I shaved another 2 seconds for a 3:36 flat. And I actually ran that one at the Occidental Invite. Funny story, they didn't think I was fast enough to be in the fast heat, so they put me in the B heat. But the fast heat ended up going out kind of slow, so I actually won the whole thing from the B heat and stole the prize money. I think it was $2,500 in prize money. I actually stole the check from a good friend of mine, Will Lear. He'll never let me live that one down. But it was a great night for me. I set a new personal best just a few weeks out of the Olympic trials, and it really helped set the tone for my season, set kind of that momentum that carried me through that win at the 2012 Olympic trials. That 3:36 converts down to a 3:53.2 mile, which is fast, but not as fast as I actually ran it in 2013, which some would argue was my best year ever. It's the year that I won my silver medal at the World Championships. So for 1500 meters, just a few weeks before those World Championships, I really wanted to jump in. I knew I was fit. I was winning a lot. I had just won the London Diamond League. I was kind of having workouts that showed that I should probably be able to run a really fast 1500. And so I begged the meet directors at Monaco. Now, Monaco Diamond League, is known as being one of the fastest meets, the fastest tracks in the world. And I said, you've just got to let me in, give me my chance, and I will run a huge personal best. And I think they thought I was going to run like 3:30 or 3:31, and I wasn't able to pull that off. But I did run 3:34.5 in the race that Mo Farah ran his personal best. I think he ran 3:28. So I was well behind him, 6 seconds behind him, but it allowed me to get towed to that 3:34.5, which to this day is my fastest 1500 ever, and it converts to a 3:51.6 mile. So obviously also my fastest mile. Now in the thumbnail I said, hey, this is my progression from 4:35 down to 3:51.6. Those of you who ran and raced against me, you're probably saying, Nick never ran 3:51.6. I didn't. I did it in a 1500 and I'm converting it. So take it with a grain of salt. Full transparency, I'm not trying to BS anybody here. 3:51.6 is the fastest converted time that I ever ran. 2014, another missed year. I talked about that in a couple videos. You know, I had a really bad avulsion fracture in my knee, and it kept me out almost the entire season. I almost retired. In my mind, I did retire that year because at that age, I was 30 years old. The thought of trying to come back and compete against a bunch of young 20-year-olds, it just seemed overwhelming. But I did. That summer I started Run Gum, and the passion that I had for the brand, the passion that I had for the product, and wanting to get it into more people's hands and teach them about how Run Gum can help people train harder and race better and get through busy work days. Just the passion that I had as an entrepreneur got me running again and got me back on my feet. And in 2015, I ran a full mile outdoors at the Music City Distance Carnival, 3:59.6 for second place, and this is actually the only true sub 4-minute mile I ever ran on an outdoor track. So you saw the 3:56 that I ran in 2007. This is a 3:59.6 outdoor mile that I ran in 2015. And that's that. That's a wrap. 2016, I got injured before I had a chance to run at the Olympic trials or run a proper 1500. 2017, it's the same story. And you know, you saw in the 800 that I actually hung on for dear life through 16 and 17 and stopped PRing. And I saw the writing on the wall. I said, I'm not going to continue to set personal best in the 15. I'm not going to continue to set personal best in the mile or the 800. I need to go focus on other things. And I ran a marathon. I ran 3 hours in the marathon. And of course, now you guys know that I'm training for 100 meters and I'm trying to break 11 seconds in the 100. So to you young athletes out there, the moral of the story is look at this progression. You know, I know a lot of kids in high school and they're saying, I want to be the best today. Well, that's just not possible, okay? Because you have to put in the work. You got to hit every single stop on the way down. And if you don't, you know, you're going to pay the price. You're going to have gaps. And I wish I didn't in this progression. But just remember that most athletes will not hit their endurance peak until their mid to late 20s or even 30s. So it's about just consistently putting in the work and getting a little bit better each and every year. And ultimately, having that graph that you can be really proud of. I look back on this and I think about nearly 15, almost 20 years worth of work went into making this. And I'm really proud of that consistent drop that I had. And I'm also proud of myself for knowing when to hang up the spikes. I think the cool thing about track and field is you can run literally till you're 100 years old. I always talk about, those exhibition races where you see people who are over 100 years old out there running 100-meter races. And so this is the kind of thing where even a 35-year-old can set new PRs and new goals. And I'm excited to run the 100 later this summer. So if you found this helpful, if you found this entertaining, do me a favor, consider subscribing. You can better believe that I'm going to be live streaming those 100 races when I get started. First race is June 27th. So I hope to see you guys out at the track. Bye.